morning, everybody. It's a privilege to be speaking with you today. Closer, yeah. My name is David. I'm a virtual construction engineer for Davis Construction. I'm going to talk to you today about the Galleria Corso project located in Chevy Chase, Maryland. And so before we get into the presentation, I want to talk a little bit about Davis. It's a family-owned company, founded in 1915. The HQ is in Rockville in the DMV area. So we have a lot of projects in DC and Maryland, and now we're expanding to Philly and Charlotte, North Carolina. We have about 550 employees. It's 100% employee-owned, and we were doing about $1.2 billion of work. We have a couple different markets. We work a lot in residential offices. We're expanding into critical environments such as labs and data centers. And a little bit about myself. So I'm based in Rockville now. I am originally from New Jersey. I studied construction engineering and management at Virginia Tech, graduated last year, and so I started with Davis about a year ago, and so I've been working in cmBuilder for most of that time. Most of my experience previously was in 3D modeling and CAD, and so it's been interesting to pick up the simulation and CAD side of construction. And so you'll see from the image here, my background really was in aerospace, and I'd done a lot of aircraft design. And so construction was a bit of a departure for me from aerospace, but a lot of the same CAD principles still apply. So today I'm going to talk about the project, where it is, how big it is, what was my strategy for breaking down a complex model, what were some of the challenges I faced, lessons learned, and then some other use cases that we have at Davis for cmBuilder. So a little bit about the project. The Galleria Corso project is 545,000 square feet, an elder care senior living center in Chevy Chase, Maryland, about $223 million project. In phase A, which I'll be showing you today, there's 5 buildings. It's in a residential area, so we're trying to be cognizant of the surrounding citizens and mitigating dust and other pollutants. So this is the mess that came to my desk when I first started this project. And a lot of the time you'll find people who are focused on just their specific task are not really thinking about formatting information in a way that's able to convey. And so my job has always been, how do I bring your ideas from your head to the 3D model? And so with this really congested plan they gave me, I had to do a little bit of diving through the plans, discussing with people, and picking their brains about what they really wanted to execute, because we can't bring this into a proposal, and that's where cmBuilder steps in. So we have 2 phases. In phase 1, we're building 5 different buildings, and so the format the model was submitted in, it is one large Revit file, about 2 gigabytes. And so a large part of my approach was, how do I split the model up and make it lightweight enough for cmBuilder, and so that the simulation will flow smoothly. And so another part is that there's a very large site, and so earthwork was a very large consideration. All the different excavations and initial terrain data was very important for the QTO aspect of this project. This is all important information for the estimate. And the other most critical part is the scheduling. We're going to be working on multiple zones at the same time, and so breaking the model out so that we could show that schedule and bring everything in was a very big focus for me. So we were given a P6 schedule, and we were able to import all of our milestones. But you'll see when we get to the presentation a little bit further on, there's about 120 milestones that we had to put together to show each of these individual phases coming through. Now, the original request that was given to me, the owner wanted to see the progress on the project within 3-month jumps. And so for me to show all of that data, I wanted to break it out as granular as I could and then show at a specific milestone the progress as I came through. So it was really important for me to dive into the schedule, break down when one zone was being worked on versus another, and bring all of that information in through the milestones. So one of the challenges I had was I had to prepare the model not only from the Revit standpoint, but also the initial surroundings. I was bringing in civil drawings to use the contour lines and the custom terrain in cmBuilder to have accurate terrain and topography, so our calculations would be correct as we do our QTO. And so a really important factor for me was, what is the difference between the model versus the reality? And I want to bring my model as close to reality as possible. We don't want to show things that are unrealistic, and it all serves to produce a better logistics plan overall. But another important thing with this is that I had to iterate on that design. And so there were a lot of things that I didn't know specifically about construction when I came into the job. And so when I initially started on this project, maybe 9 months ago, there were a lot of questions that I had that were unanswered. And as I went through, people reviewed the slides, gave feedback, and I was able to make more accurate updates so that we could align the model with reality. And so this is what the Revit model looked like. It had 6 linked Revit models within it. It's about 1.8 gigabytes. And so a big portion for me was, how do I prep my Revit model so that it's lightweight enough for cmBuilder, but also showing the great depth of information that's here. The designers put a great amount of work into it, and it looks very nice. And so a big part for me was removing all these superfluous things, the things on the inside that we don't really need to see. It included all the MEP, all the fixtures, all the important things, but that's all not really needed for the purposes of our presentation. And so reducing this model down to structure and architecture was a really big part for me, but part of the problem was the entire site has a continuous slab, and they didn't break it out nicely for each building to have its own structure or own separate layers. So a big portion for me was selecting certain portions of the model, exporting that either as an IFC or as a separate Revit file, and bringing that into my cmBuilder scenario so I'd be able to work with it more quickly. Another part as well was the settings, right? We want to make sure that it's rich, but it's not too heavy. And also, it was important for me to think about, what was my deliverable strategy going to be looking like? What are they actually trying to see? Are they trying to see the progress of the structure so they can communicate with their team in real time, or are they just trying to see how long is it going to take practically for us to get people into this building? And so a couple of different strategies we employed to enhance the general site imagery. The initial imagery was a little bit out of season for what the owner wanted to show, and so we used a tool called Plex Earth. This would bring in some more refined Google Maps imagery and create a mosaic around the site, and so we can see a little bit more high-res imagery at a specific time of year. In addition, the topography that I brought in from the civil plan, I manually placed all these points. I've now learned you don't need that many points to get the message across, but it was a very important thing for me to see practically what does my site look like, because the initial terrain data, while it's helpful to get a basis, it really matters what the use case is for your project. And so for us, QTO was a big factor, and we wanted to make sure that that made sense. And so overall, I brought my civil drawing in, projected it onto the terrain, and started placing my points along those contour lines as I saw fit. You can see a very dense area there on the west side of the site, but overall it slopes from the top to the northeast to the southwest. And so I'll start now the simulation. Oh, excuse me. Okay, very good. So you can see we're nested within a neighborhood here. We have a main road on the east side of the site here. The first phase was the demolition of a couple existing buildings. So we go through here with a couple dust suppression systems, breaking down the buildings, doing abatement inside the buildings, and so on. And then we start working on our mobilization in phase A. And so here, we're preparing to do the support on excavation on the west side of the site. And so as we continue down to the south, we start preparing our earthwork in the north side of the site. And so we continue on installing utilities, and we start here with our slab on grade. And so this is a really big site. We have an entire building sitting on top of a garage deck combined under all the buildings. And so we're working on different segments of the project at the same time. And so as you'll see structure coming up, you'll see structure coming up on a further segment in the south of the site. And so by the time we're at level 2 here, we're working on the slab on grade for building C and D. And so you'll see as well that we have 2 tower cranes. We're planning to bring mechanical equipment in on the east side of the site. And it was a very important part of our design to pick a crane that was large enough and capable enough to pick across different areas of the site. And so here we're looking at building 1 as its structure is almost complete. Continuing on now to the remainder of the south side of the site, working on building B and C. One thing that I would say is a lesson learned here, the initial Revit model had no breaks for the columns, and so if I was to do this again, I might export it as an IFC and split the columns by level so that I could have my layers properly. But a big component of this project was it was handed to me after an initial version was already released. So my boss about a year ago worked on this project and put a initial version out. And so when I first came in, I tried to do as much as I could building off of what he had, not trying to reinvent the wheel. But I found that when I was preparing for this summit, it was better to start from scratch. And knowing when to start again and reiterate on the initial intention is very important for me. And so as we continue now building the rest of the structure, you can see building B is now complete and we're working on the clubhouse at building C here. And you can also see, it's a little bit difficult to see, but the wall frame is also coming up. And so these are all important details that were given to me in the schedule, things that our field team wanted to know about. And so overall, we wanted to be able to communicate with both the community at large and with our team internally. Part of the request was that the county wanted to share this presentation with the surrounding neighborhood so they would know practically what does it look like, how much disruption is there going to be in my day-to-day life, and what are you doing to mitigate that disruption. So we're continuing on with the remainder of construction in the south here, almost done with the structure on building D, and building C is just about complete here. You'll see in a few moments the trucks coming into align with the crane and allow the mechanical equipment to be prepared on the roof. This is a really big lift. This whole project has a lot of moving parts, and it was really important for me as well to pass this information on to the safety team so they could start preparing where to place equipment, evacuation plans, and we'll go into a little bit more detail later about other ways Davis is using this technology to share that information. And so we'll continue on here, finishing out the remainder of the structure on building D. There's some work going on the insides here in terms of structure. You'll see the pick here for the mechanical equipment. And so now we start getting to do facade on the building in the north. So as we're finishing up wall framing on the south building, we're finishing up architecture on the north side. And at this phase in the project, they're planning to have some level of material laid down either within the structure or underneath in the garage. And so sorting out the logistics of that was not fully fleshed out by the time I got to make this presentation. And so this was really a facilitator for the discussion. These models have been really important for taking it into a meeting with people who maybe are not so technical but bring a wealth of construction knowledge so they can see practically, yeah, that doesn't quite look right. What can we do about making this look more realistic or more feasible? And so as the remainder of the facade comes up on building B, we'll finish up building C now, and we're starting to work to close in the remainder of building D here. So there's really a lot that went into putting this model together. It was a lot of getting my camera in just the right angle, selecting a certain part of the model, and making sure it aligned with a milestone. And that required a lot of back and forth in terms of testing, making sure it looked correct. And I think a big portion of that was due to the way the Revit model was structured. We can't always control the inputs, but what we can do is make it work with what we have. And so not being able to use the object tree was one of the challenges that we faced here. And so I was able to kind of maneuver around that by working on selection, temporary hiding objects, and making sure I'm seeing exactly what I want to see. And so by the end of the simulation, now we have all of our hardscape and landscape. And so all of our buildings are now complete. We have a theater, gatehouse, clubhouse. And overall, this was a really heavy lift. But over the span of maybe 2 or 3 weeks, I was able to put it together. But this was largely an independent project. And so for me, it was really important to communicate early and often about getting feedback. What are the things that you're looking for specifically in this project? Who's the end audience, right? Who are we building this for? And so this was all really important information that we wanted to pass along to the county. And it was a really great experience to learn about the intricacies of cmBuilder. So some of my lessons learned, right? know your audience. This first presentation that was provided by my boss here was, it was sufficient for the time, but overall visually it left something to be desired. And so I took that as a main component for me. I wanted to make sure that it was visually pleasing, cohesive in terms of color and style. And so largely at Davis, I've been responsible for establishing those standards, and I tried to pull out all the stops and make sure that this presentation was an example of what we can do on the high end at Davis. And so the other part of preparing my model was segmenting it, right? Understanding that it's a big lift, and so you have to break it down into steps that are workable, otherwise it ends up getting overwhelming. So another big portion of this is that I iterated in different scenarios. So my first model, the model I had provided by my boss, was useful. So I made a second version, a third version, and then finally a one that had all of the scheduling information fully included. But the original request was to have milestones and 3-month jumps. So it was very helpful to be able to duplicate, build on top of what I already had. And then a really important thing for me was planning my deliverable format. Are they asking for images? Are they asking for a video? Do they want to be able to fly around? These are all important things, because if you have little blemishes in your model, you don't want to give anybody ammunition. You don't want to say, well, this looks wrong. I don't think you guys are thinking the whole project through. And so it's really important context to know when you're starting your project. And so for me, I knew that I was going to have to share this presentation with the county, wanted to make sure that this was presentable enough for everybody to see the full vision that Davis had for the project. Another use case that we have for cmBuilder at Davis is structural planning. So this was a recent project that we won. A big focus for them was, how do we demo this existing building and build a new structure on top of it, build a support structure within it rather, while the demo is still going on. And so the plan that was proposed to me, how can we shimmy steel beams in and put our piles in order to save schedule time, build the structure for the new building, while also saving money and enabling crews to work simultaneously. And so a big part of us winning this job was showing our intent, working with the structural engineers and communicating their intent. And so there was about 3 or 4 different iterations of this structural plan. But overall, what ended up happening was our plan was cut holes in the slab, slide steel in with a chain lift, and allow the structure to come down while the remainder of this support structure is coming up through the garage level. So this is a 15-floor building being converted, not converted, but rather built for next to a hotel. And so being able to not disrupt the surrounding area for too long was a very important piece of this project as well. And so you'll see that by the time the building demos down to level 2, our support steel is already ready, and the rest of the building can go on as planned. Another use case that we have was for our scheduling. We wanted to communicate our pour dates with a team on a very large project, and language barrier was a very important part of the project team. They wanted to be able to communicate with the teams pouring concrete, but wanted to do it in a visual format. And so for me, I took that challenge and decided it'd be a good format to color code. The building, we have 2 phases here, about 8 stories, excuse me. And so communicating what areas we were being worked on when, and what level you were working on was very important. So we started with red on level 1, orange on level 2, and so on as we go through the rainbow here. And so in the spirit of Pride Month, it's very rainbow, very flamboyant, but I think it gets the message across that we have all of the information in a visual format. You don't really need to explain to somebody in the same language what you're seeing here. And so this was a really important resource for the team, something you can put on a QR code and just hang up somewhere in the office so that everybody can know. And this is something I want to expand into further on other projects. We've used color coding on other projects for facade progress, for example, and that's something that we've had a lot of owners request of us now. And so the importance of communication as a visual medium, something that cmBuilder does really well at. And for us, it's been instrumental in terms of communicating and breaking those barriers. A picture speaks 1,000 words, and that couldn't be more true within cmBuilder. And so there's not a whole lot really going on, but we continue up through the remainder of the building here with with structure going up in phase A and phase B here. And so this project is still ongoing. It's a Hambro structural system, so they are experiencing a lot of challenges in terms of shifting things around, making sure that all of your systems can fit into the space, and making sure your cores and sleeves are not interfering with the structure. And so having an initial resource to communicate some of that information here was very important for them. So the remainder of the presentation is really just showing the completion of that schedule. But it was a very, very big project, and so showing that information in a visual medium was fairly important for us. It didn't take too long to put together. A similar process in terms of selection visually of the objects from the Revit model, but we have a very dense model, and so it's very helpful to have all of that information and present it in a usable format. Another use case was interiors. So for this project here, it is a retirement home for the armed forces, and so in this facility there's those who are differently abled, unable to walk, and so access to elevators was a very important part of the safety plan. And so while we're working on construction in the east part of the building, we want to be cognizant that the west part of the building is occupied, and so how are we going to be able to maintain access? Where's the fire protection? And how do we enable emergency services to make their way into the site? And so what we did here is we used the basic massing in our 2D plan, and we just kind of shifted that so it lays just on top. And so we can show visually, without having a detailed Revit model, all the different information. And so we've done a couple different projects like this where I wasn't able to show you, but we had some secure spaces, so different wall types, different security zones. Visualizing that information can be done really simply by just using your 2D plans and basic massing. And I'm sure cmBuilder is going to come out with more advancements in the interior space as we go on. But this is what we've been able to work with so far within the existing tools. And so a little bit about cmBuilder at Davis. So we have about 263 registered users, 80 unique projects, and of those 80 projects, 68% of them were project awards. So it was very helpful for us to visually present all of this information, and it has tangibly supported our progress. And this is really the way forward for logistics. It's a new era, right? We have 2D plans that show our intent, but we need to take it the next step up. Show that forward thinking, show that care and dedication to the project, and making sure that you can see it through from beginning to end. And so with that, that's my presentation. Thank you for your time.